the Sony ZV-1 and the Sony ZV-E10. Who will win? Roll the... All right, so here it is, everyone. The matchup that a lot of you have wanted to see, the Sony ZV-1 versus the Sony ZV-E10. So Sony has just recently released this brand new Sony ZV-E10, which is aimed at vloggers and content creators who want something light that they can carry around with them, and that will be a follow-up to the wildly popular Sony ZV-1. But how do they match up? Let's break it down. Let's start with some of the similarities. They're both small and lightweight. With both cameras, you can shoot up to 120 frames a second in 1080 and up to 30 frames a second in 4K. They also both have decent built-in onboard microphones. Now, this was one of the carryovers from the ZV-1. The microphone on the ZV-E10 is exactly the same as it was on the ZV-1, which is actually really nice because it did a pretty good job for a built-in onboard microphone. They both, of course, have flip-out screens that flip out to the side, not to the top, which is great. We like them when they flip out to the side so we can see everything and they're not getting blocked by any microphones or anything like that. But here's where things get a little interesting. On the ZV-E10, when you flip out the screen, the connections for your cables are right here. So if you want to have your cables plugged in and have the screen flipped out, they're gonna be obstructed by the cables that are plugged in. What the hell? On the ZV-1, all the cable connections were on the right side of the camera and the screen flipped out this way. I don't know why they decided to go a different route with the ZV-E10 and put the connectors on this side. I guess it's because this is where the battery grip is. That's just really annoying, right? Like if you want to have cables connected and have your screen flipped out, you can't see the screen. Also, on top of that, if you do have cables plugged in and this cable cover is open, when you try to go flip out your screen, you can't tilt it. It hits that door. Oh well, that's kind of nitpicky, but just wanted to point that out. Moving on. They both have the popular product showcase mode where you can hold up an object to the front of the camera and it will automatically rack focus to that object without having to put it in front of your face or any weird cheat thing like that. They both have that built in. I think people really loved that with the ZV-1. They kept that with the ZV-E10. Good job. Of course, both cameras come with the Sony picture profiles built in, so if you like to really dive into your color grades, you've got all your HLG and S-Log and Cine profiles built into the cameras. Feel free to use those on both models. Now, speaking of connectors, on the ZV-1, we had a microphone input, a USB, and an HDMI. On the ZV-E10, we still have a microphone input, which is up here at the top, and then we have a USB-C, micro HDMI, but they also included a headphone jack. That's actually really cool. That was something we didn't have on the ZV-1, and I think a lot of people wanted. We like to have headphones plugged into our camera sometimes so we can monitor our audio. That was a really good add on this camera. So let's go over some of the differences now. The obvious one is their size. The ZV-E10 is slightly larger than the ZV-1, especially once you start adding on lenses, right? And that was one of the great things about the ZV-1 was it was so small and compact that you could literally throw this in your pocket and carry it around with you. You can't really put this one in your pocket because you're gonna be attaching lenses to it, which makes it a lot bigger. Plus the grip is much larger, it's a little bit wider. They're about the same thickness, but overall the ZV-E10 still small and light, but quite a bit larger than the ZV-1. So as far as power goes, the Sony ZV-1 didn't have fantastic battery life. It ran on the NP-BX1 batteries. The ZV-E10 does take larger batteries, which does give it a little bit better battery life. Still not great, but better than the ZV-1. This uses the NP FW50 batteries. So as far as button layout goes, you have some similarities and some differences. The zoom rockers are the same. The shutter button is the same. You still have your background focus button on top as well. Big red record button, so you can see that easily. Then on the rear of the camera, the buttons and dials are exactly the same. They're just laid out a little bit differently, but you still have your menu and function and wheel dial, your trash can button, and your footage review button. All that is still there on the ZV-E10, carried over from the ZV-1. Now the ZV-1 had built-in ND filters, the ZV-E10 does not. So if you want to have the ability to knock down some of that bright sunlight outside, you're gonna wanna pick up some aftermarket ND filters. I highly recommend the brand Earth, URTH. They make great filters, great optical quality, and they also plant trees for every purchase that you make from them, which is great, giving back to the planet. You all know that Remain Wild is all about wildlife and habitat conservation. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already. It helps the channel grow. I will be donating a portion of money to habitat and wildlife conservation at the end of every year. Please, please, I would love your support. Thank you. Now let's talk about the sensors that are on each one of these cameras. At the core of the ZV-1 is a 1-inch 20 megapixel CMOS sensor. The ZV-E10 has a APS-C size 24 megapixel CMOS sensor. This is the exact same sensor that's actually in the A6000 series that Sony released, which comes with its plus and minuses compared to the ZV-1. The plus is that being an APS-C size sensor, it's much larger than this one, which will perform better in low light. I'll show you some examples of that in a little bit. The flaws, though, that came with this sensor are those rolling shutter effects, and that's one of the things that might bother a lot of you if you do a lot of movement in your vlogs. The rolling shutter basically makes vertical lines and things kind of wavy when you're moving around. It can be very distracting and annoying when you're shooting. So that's kind of a bummer. They differ a little bit in their video ISO range, so this ZV-1 goes from 125 base ISO in video all the way up to 12,800. And the ZV-E10 has a video ISO range from 100 all the way up to 32,000. And again, like I said, it is a little bit better in low light than the ZV-1, example coming soon. Now, if you guys use these for stills, the ZV-1 had a burst rate of 24 frames per second, which is pretty amazing. The ZV-E10 only goes up to 11 frames per second. As far as stabilization goes, the ZV-1 has an optical stabilizer and a digital stabilizer, whereas the ZV-E10 has only optical stabilization available. Overall, the stabilization was much better with the ZV-1 than the ZV-E10. You have unlimited record time in 4K on both of these cameras, just in case any of you had any concerns about that. I know that there are some cameras on the market that have limitations to how long you can record. The ZV-1 has 315 autofocus points, where the ZV-E10 has 425 because of that larger sensor. So the next most obvious difference between these two cameras is the lens configuration. So on the ZV-1, we had a built-in 24 to 70 millimeter lens that went from a 1.8 to a 2.8 aperture, which was really nice. The ZV-E10 kit lens is a 16 to 50, 3.5 to 5.6, but on this APS-C size sensor, that's a 24 to 70 at 3.5 to 5.6. So the kit lens on this camera is not nearly as good as the built-in lens on the ZV-1. I kind of wish they would have given us a faster lens, or maybe at least a wider focal length. That was one of the complaints that a lot of people had about the ZV-1. It wasn't quite wide enough for vlogging, so it would have been nice if they had included a wider lens with the ZV-E10. You're gonna have to pick up a different lens if you want a wider field of view for your vlogs. I recommend the Sony 10 to 18 millimeter f4 lens. I did a full review about it, and I'll put a link for that video down in the description below so you can check that one out. So why don't we take these cameras outside and do a little vlogging test so you can see what they look like side by side. Let's go. So this is the main vlogging test here of the two cameras. ZV-1 on this side, the ZV-E10 on this side. You're looking at them side by side. I put them on both the same settings. They both have ISO 160, and the f-stop is at 4. I put the ZV-1 at 4 because that's as wide open as the kit lens can go on the ZV-E10, and that's, I figured that would just be the fair test. Obviously, because of the larger sensor on the ZV-E10, you're seeing a little bit more of the picture around me. They're pretty much the same focal length, because remember, the 16 to 50 millimeter kit lens that comes with the ZV-E10 is pretty much a 24 to 70 millimeter lens once you put it on that APS-C size sensor, which is what the ZV-1 has, a 24 to 70 millimeter lens. I think these are both great cameras, and I think that everybody is gonna have different opinions about what they want for their vlogging cameras. For me personally, I kind of tend to lean more towards the ZV-1 still. I still like it. I still think it's a really awesome rock star camera. I think it accomplished exactly what Sony set out to do, which was create a very small, compact vlogging camera that we can just throw in our pockets, literally, and take it anywhere with us and shoot any videos that we want to. The ZV-E10 is still small and lightweight, but now you have lenses that you're gonna have to carry around with you. It's not quite as small. It certainly doesn't fit in your pocket. And I think that that was just, I don't know, if they're trying to, keep it with the small, light, pocket-sized cameras, the ZV-E10 really missed the mark on that one. So, I don't know, for whatever that's worth, that's what I think. Let's go back to the studio and check out some more stuff. So as you can see, these are both great cameras. They have different strengths and different weaknesses. Some of you might prefer the ZV-1, some of you might prefer the ZV-E10. That's entirely up to you. Whatever fits your kit and your mode of shooting more, go with that. If you want to have the ability to interchange lenses, go with the ZV-E10. If you want the super small, super compact, great value camera straight out of the box, the ZV-1 is the way to go. But if you want to see how to make both of them even better, make sure you check out these two videos right here.